right. I'm here with my friend Annie, and she and I have worked together for almost 3 years now, finishing up some exciting work with Sequoia. And as I mentioned, she's with Sequoia Financial. She's the Chief Client Experience Officer, but she's 10 other things too. But we'll let her get into that a little bit. And really, the whole spirit of this conversation is Annie and I want to talk a little bit about what it was like to work together. I'll sing some of the praises of Sequoia along the way because Sequoia is an incredible place, and hear a little bit about kind of the culture craft experience from Annie's perspective, because it's not the most traditional kind of hire a marketing people perspective. And so sometimes it helps to hear it from people who've lived through it themselves. And that's where Annie is here to make us all better, brighter, smarter, things Annie does well every day. So before we get too far, Annie, for those people who are watching this video and don't know much about Sequoia, tell us a little bit about Sequoia, both what it was like when we met 3 years ago and a little bit about what it's like today.
Sure. So Sequoia, when we met, it's been a walk down memory lane for me to think about what the world looked like 3 years ago. But at the time, we had about $8 billion in assets under management and around 100 team members, probably about half a dozen offices. And where we sit today is just shy of 20 billion in assets under management, almost 275 team members and 14 offices around the country. So huge growth has taken place throughout the time of our relationship. And I know the numbers matter just to frame what Sequoia is in the industry, but the real answer is that Sequoia is just a really special place. I feel it every day. Our team feels it. Our clients feel it. And that is really what we led us to you, Nick, because we had this little issue we were working through, which was we used to say, people love us once they know us. So we met you because we had to solve the problem. We're at this inflection point. We said, how can we get people to love us before they know us? And that's where you entered our lives a few years ago.
Yeah, let's pause there for just a little bit, because I think you and I talk to a lot of people in the investment management, financial planning industry. We know the industry well. That's, I think, a common sentiment, right? Once people know us, they love us, right? The secret sauce is on the inside. And sometimes that's true and sometimes it isn't, to be honest. Sometimes it's more of just a story we tell ourselves. At Sequoia, there is genuinely an inside secret sauce. But in a lot of situations, people go looking for sort of a tactical solution to that of, oh, we need to do better ads, or we need to write better blogs or whatever. Sequoia made the decision to take a step back and go, hey, maybe there's things we don't know that we should know. I think that's a little bit kind of part of who you are, but tell me a little bit about that decision to step back.
Yeah, we had tried to solve the answer of how we get people to know us, to love us before they know us. We tried to solve that on our own for years. And I think the big realization was that none of us ever learned how to do that. We learned how to be entrepreneurs. We learned how to be great wealth advisors, but none of us ever learned how to be marketers. So we had to really step back and say, we need to build our brand. And we didn't exactly know what that meant, but that is what led us to you, because we recognized that there was something in the brand that needed to come alive.
Yeah. And I think it's important to mention that this whole time you have marketers on staff who are doing good tactical marketing work, ads, content, web pages, etc. And still there's a question of maybe this is bigger than just a selection of marketing tactics. Maybe there's something more to it. Brand is often the word that we use to capture that, although brand creates a lot of confusion for people too, which we'll get into when we talk a little bit today. So we've worked on a ton of stuff together over that time period. Some of it you weren't as close to. We worked a little bit on some M&A projects and other things. But why don't you give the folks watching just a little bit of a view of what we worked on and how you experienced it?
Yeah. So I'm probably pretty typical in the advisory world in that I just thought brand was, we'll get a cool new logo, we'll get some new fonts, we'll get some swag, and we'll be done. And I remember we had this on-site visit together and you were asking us all these deep prodding questions about who we are and how we operate and challenging us on what is differentiated. And it really started to come together to me that brand wasn't all the cool visual elements of it. It was a huge foundational project that we had to tackle to translate our culture that we felt and lived every day internally into who the world saw us as. And so that's where we started with you. And it was a challenging and eye-opening and really fantastic journey.
Yeah, let's talk a little about some of the challenges of that, because a lot of RIAs, when we started the process, you guys felt like we know what makes us special and different. We have a general, and it was really, I think, not uncommon, perceived to be a wordsmithing exercise. So we can just find the right words, then we'll unlock it. But it was a little bit more work than that. So talk a little bit about your experience of that and realizing that what it was like to go under the hood.
Yeah, it was interesting for me because I started to realize that everything that we talked about that was our differentiator that I had grown up with in the industry. I've been in this industry for almost 25 years. And the things that we said 25 years ago, we were still saying today. We were saying we are comprehensive, we are fiduciaries, we put our clients first. And those things that were differentiators 25 years ago are now table stakes. And they're essentially the definition of the industry that we are a part of. And we had to go on this journey of no longer differentiating ourselves by the industry that we're in to finding the way that we differentiate ourselves among the tens of thousands of really great independent fiduciary comprehensive advisors that exist in the RIA space.
Yeah, I think RIA, like a lot of high value industries, is the industry sense of itself is so strong, right? The RIA club knows what it is, and it has infiltrated and permeated almost every firm in the ecosystem. And that had a lot of power when the RIA space was trying to break through a lot of other competitive spaces, banks, transactional brokers, all those kinds of things. Now that it's moved in more of a kind of a prominent position, right, that continuity across the industry actually becomes a challenge that every firm has to overcome because differentiation feels a little bit challenged, I guess. It's not, it, everybody's saying a lot of the same thing because we've been spending the last 20 years training ourselves to say the same things.
Yeah, and it was a big inflection point for us in our journey together on our brand is recognizing that the thing that helped us get where we are today is no longer exactly the thing that's going to help us tomorrow because we're no longer just uh, working in a competitive manner against banks or wirehouses or larger brokers. We're now finding ways to compete against each other, and we had to have the way to verbalize what it is that we do that's different.
Yep. And the rest of the neighboring industries, banking, et cetera, have co-opted some of the language, right? So it's not just that the RIA space has become more robust and so therefore more competitive, but a lot of the neighboring types of businesses that your clients might take their money to have learned how to speak RIA. And so that that differentiation is then even another layer underneath the surface.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that because it's like this sea of sameness that everyone talks about in our industry. The sea has itself gotten bigger
Yes.
and the sameness has gotten samer. So we really needed to break away from that.
So we did a ton of work, right? We rolled up our sleeves. We understood what was going on at Sequoia. We put some words to that. That produced a waterfall of projects that we brought in partners for design, messaging, website. And those were important projects. We don't want to minimize those. A logo's not going to make you money, but in the case of Sequoia, needed a logo, right? The old one has run its course. But then we had to go to a kind of another pivot in terms of what it was going to take to actually make brand work for Sequoia, not just putting words out into the world. So talk to us a little bit about what that was like.
So the brand, the easy part in our case in this whole process was that we talked a lot about the idea that brand and culture are essentially the same thing. It's the inward looking version of it and the outward looking version of it. So you marry the two. So after we had the foundational work of defining what our brand and culture is, and then we made it look pretty, we had to go and figure out how we live it, how the brand becomes durable and
Mhm.
seemingly effortless through a lot of intentional effort. And that intentional effort really was how do we think about our brand and our culture through every element of internal communication, how we make strategic decisions, how we make tactical decisions, how we make client decisions, and every decision point through every different role within the organization, how that is the representation of the words that we put to our culture and brand. And The way I can tell that it was done right is that once we put the words behind everything, our team collectively, through all our geographies and in many different roles, said, well, of course, that's who we are. And so it was easy for them with the right leadership and guidance. It was easy for us to start taking that work and weaving it into the fabric of who we are through big decisions and small every single day.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about the nuance of that, and we experienced it, is there was that gut alignment of, yes, this is right. This is who we are. And simultaneously, there was a new aspiration. There was like, okay, if this is who we are, what else needs to shift? Right. So it starts to raise questions, like you said, about internal structure and comms and how departments interact and CX. You and I, obviously, you are a head of client experience. We have a ton of conversations about CX. And I think that's where things start to get really powerful is we move beyond just the positioning work, the naming, the messaging, all of those kinds of things that can have immediate impact, but they get you. What I would say is, using a football metaphor, it's a big football weekend, right? It gets you in the red zone. All that work gets you in the red zone, and then you've got to fight the game of inches, which is all of that. How does this actually show up in who we are every day? One of the things that's incredible about Sequoia is you all's willingness and ability to do that work, to show up and make those tactical decisions that reflect the brand over and over again.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's definitely been a journey.
Where would you say the biggest impact came about? So the things that like are going to have long lasting staying power at Sequoia.
The biggest impact to me is definitely that working with CultureCraft, you helped us to give voice to our culture through really the creation of our brand. You helped us to really dig deep to convey with precision what it is that made Sequoia stand out in this industry. Because so much, and I see this with team members, I see it with other businesses, when you're great at something every day, you start to not see it yourself
Yeah.
because it just becomes ordinary. And so having another partner, having CultureCraft, having you guys to come in and say, you also see a lot of other firms in the industry. I'm sure certain other firms do things better than we do in aspects, but you found what Sequoia does better. You were able to be that independent collaborator to really say the things that that Sequoia has almost taken for granted that we're great at. Let's highlight those. Let's make those the special thing.
Yeah. One of the things I like to talk about is that in real life, superheroes don't know what their superpower is, right? Because it's just a part of your life. It's the thing that you do every day. And so organizations, particularly ones that have some longevity, like Sequoia had when we first worked with you, is you don't recognize you have this sort of secret superpower. And I can remember those conversations with you and others where I would say, but what about this? I would start poking at it, right? What about this thing? Yeah, of course. Yeah, we do that. I'm like, but other people don't do that. Or other people talk about that, but don't actually fulfill on it, right? What if we kept poking at that nerve and we kept poking and we got to some really nuanced but simple things that took you, I think you in particular, but other leaders of the firm too, to go, oh yeah, we're gonna come out of our Midwest nights for a second, right? And go, we are pretty damn good at that. That is pretty special. And that was really fun to watch. That was an incredible part of the process.
Yeah, it opened my eyes so much because, yeah, Nick, is I've only ever been with Sequoia. I have been with this firm for 25 years, from 50 million in assets to almost 20 billion. There were nuances that not having external perspective in my own professional life, despite industry contacts and all my friends that work in this industry at other great firms, I just didn't see it. I knew it was special, but I didn't realize that it was so differentiated.
Yeah, I think there's two factors at work there is, and you've heard me say this, is everybody needs a mirror, right? None of us know what our face looks like. We all need a mirror. And part of what we like to do with my team is to come in and say, hey, you don't know what you look like. You think you do but you don't. We all have dysmorphia about that. And simultaneously, the longer you're in an organization and the more influence you carry in that organization, the less likely you are to see it clearly. And that's a bummer for leaders, right? You're like, but I try so hard to get good feedback. But the reality is those long-term senior leadership roles tend to just get insular because not because of you, but because organizations just, that's the way they go. And that those moments of going, oh, okay, I hadn't thought about that, were, I think, really critical for us getting where we needed to go.
Yeah. And I think the other impact for us, I think, was just recognizing the value of working with experts. So our whole industry is we are scrappy, we are entrepreneurial. I've never met an independent financial advisor that doesn't think they can just roll up their sleeves and figure it out themselves because it's who we are. It's in the DNA of our industry.
Oh,
But when you step back from that and you realize, wait a minute, marketing and brand and culture development, that is a completely different function than finance.
yeah.
Back to the courses you took in college, think back to the courses you take through your CFP. None of it is about brand. And that became so evident to me as we started working with CultureCraft because it was like, wait a minute, I don't need to do these adjacent things to the core functions of the job that I've been trained in, that I've been raised in. I need to partner with the right people to bring it out. I needed it for the firm. I needed it for our marketing team. And I needed it for the huge opportunity ahead.
Yeah, I think that that's so true to it's true to my experience as an entrepreneur and as a leader. I have to hire people to go, "Oh, Nick, you need to like think about this differently." And I think that is the difference, if I can toot our horn a little bit, of the perspective we bring to this is we intend to help you move your organization forward in a way that's probably going to involve change. Now, that doesn't make more tactical marketing agencies wrong that are going to make you a website or design you a logo or whatever, but that's not what they're coming to the table to do. We're coming to the table to say, you are in a place that's, and there's things that are happening in your organization that are keeping you from getting to the next place. Brand and culture are a really powerful vehicle to make those journeys. So let's leverage these really powerful tools and get you from train station A to train station B. We've talked a lot about change in your business, change in the industry, but there are also advisors that are like, we're okay, right? We don't feel this change. We're not acquiring a big business or trying to go into a new region or something. What would you say to those kinds of organizations that aren't necessarily at a massive inflection point, but might need new perspective?
Yeah. Nick, we talked about this when we first started working together is when is the right time to engage with a firm like CultureCraft? And you had laid out an organizational inflection point is one, right? You're going through a generational transition, a shift in your growth strategy, or entering new markets. Those are all great times to really engage. But if that's not applicable to an individual firm, I do think there's benefit in recognizing that our industry is at this huge inflection point right now. So if your world isn't changing, the world around you is.
Yeah.
And that presents risks and it presents huge opportunities. So I've always said as a leader, you find those opportunities and you lean in. You lean in hard and fast without looking back. And our industry is absolutely at an inflection point.
That's good. We've talked about some of the institutional and organizational impacts, but you and I spent a lot of time together, just one on one, just making decisions. What would you say how the work has impacted you as a leader?
As a leader, I think it brought me fresh perspective, which is probably the most important thing that leaders need to surround ourselves with in many aspects of our businesses as it relates to brand and culture and leadership impact within our firm. Definitely fresh perspective, the benefit of surrounding yourself with people who will challenge you and challenge industry norms or challenge the status quo and do that in a way that you have to have this deep trust that we were able to establish very quickly. That challenge always was, it felt so strong and collaborative. So for me, it was the awareness of just what a great partnership that is and how we need to seek that out in many ways, always.
Yeah, I think I want to double click on challenge for just a second because there's so much trend in the RIA industry, but I think under other industries as well. So here's the best practices. This is what the best people do. You just need to apply it to your situation. Lather, rinse, repeat. We're going to take this playbook that we did at this favorite brand, and then we're going to apply that playbook to you. You know me well enough. I'm not a playbook guy, right? We're going to use our intelligence and knowledge to then customize a toolkit that's right for you. But that also required us to, we've talked at length about challenging the internal world of what's happening with Sequoia, but also required us to challenge some of the assumptions of what's happening in the industry. So we didn't just make you a copy of what other firms were doing out there.
Yeah, I was actually, when we first started working together, I had that question because I know you work with so many different RIAs is how does it not just become the same game book or the same gameplay? And I think the difference there, why I knew pretty quickly that wouldn't happen was the way that you really went in deep. Your whole team went in deep with who is Sequoia? And you
Mhm.
started there. If I had gotten a sense that it was, this is how the industry works, so this is what you should do, we certainly would not have ended up with the outcomes that we did.
What would you say to firms, really of any kind, RIA or otherwise, that are thinking about engaging with CultureCraft? What's your best piece of advice?
Yeah, I look back to when we first met, I would say go in with an open mind. I didn't know fully what to expect when we started our first conversation. And I quickly saw that open mind and seeking to be challenged is where the magic happens with CultureCraft. If you want a consultant to execute your game book, your game plan, probably not the right fit. We were seeking a thought leader, creative innovator to partner with us to collaborate on where we go next. So open mind and get ready to be challenged because when you do that, it's actually really fun work.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had a blast. What would you say to people specifically in the RIA space who are saying, "Oh, I got to fix my growth," or we need a fresh look," or what, what should they be thinking about and how should they be making these kinds of decisions?
I think they should start first with what is the problem they are trying to solve and what types of resources can they tap in to create the solution. All too often, we're all planners, we're fixers, this is what we do. So we try to think problem, solution, problem, solution. I'd slow down for a minute and say, what is the problem and what are the resources? When you align yourself with those right resources, then you can get much more creative at what the solutions should be.
Yeah, and we found this together, find this in a lot of places, is where things go awry is sometimes we actually haven't scoped the problem correctly,
Mhm.
right? We think the problem is down here, it's actually up here, or it's over here, right? And so some of it is having that humility moment as a leader to go, do I even am I even in the right chair to even ask the right questions right now? Or do I first need better questions? And I think Sequoia had great questions from the outset, knew what it was trying to do, knew some of the challenges that we're up against. I think that's why we hit the ground running as effectively as we did. But then along the way, there was many steps where it was like, oh, this might be a different question we need to be asking that we wouldn't have asked at the outset. And I think that is part of what made the work so productive and so rich.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of question asking, which it was great. It was a learning process and a collaborative effort for the success. Um, so I'm glad I didn't try to take the approach of telling you the solutions, but even when I wanted to, always trying to use that default button of going back to asking the questions
Yeah.
instead. Um,
Yeah.
it's just been a great partnership.
Yeah. Annie, you know how much I appreciate you. I'm so glad that you were willing to spend this time today. This has been a lot of fun. And thank you for the incredible collaboration of the last couple of years of work at Sequoia. I'm excited to see we get to do what we love to do, which is to hand the work back and go, you guys run for a bit, and then we'll see how that goes. And if you want to call us back, but we're not here to hang out for eternity. I'm excited to see the fruit of all this labor and how you guys take it into the next era. And I'm sure we'll have lots of big headlines to watch as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. The projects are now in house, but the friendship will live on.
Absolutely.